what are the base video interfaces, and how are they different between each other? How do they work differently, and how are they programmed differently? Well, now I'm going to be discussing command line interface, or CLI, console user interface, or CUI, and graphical user interface, or GUI. And I'm going to explain each of them, and I'm going to demonstrate each of them as well. Kind of show you a program that is designed to run on those and explain how they work differently. Because these are the base types. CLI is really good for the input. The input is text lines in, and the output is text blocks out. So as you can see here, I started a sample of a CLI, and I have these examples too. We're actually going to run these, and we'll talk about these as well. I've got the source codes. We'll look at these. But here we got a block that was sent on out. We have a prompt, and we were able to take an input, and then it was able to be returned with some output. So that's basically the concept of CLI. It's command line interface. It's designed to take in a command and provide a response. And these are very easy to work with. On many languages are able to work with these. Most of them, it's native that they're able to work with them. C and C++, those two need to import libraries to work with pretty much anything. And there are some other ones that really just need to import libraries to work with anything. But beyond that, a lot of the programs have this built right in as a default. And then anything else needs to be added on, or in some cases it's not even available for some programming languages. Now, console user interface is it's keystrokes. It's not a full line that it's dealing with. Now you're dealing with reading individual keystrokes and possibly even seeing the mouse. I don't have a mouse demonstration on this today. And then the output is text with positions and colors, so we can actually position it on the screen and colorize it. It's more advanced. It's not just straight, here's the output. This is more controlling the whole window. And then with graphical user interface is, once again, it's keystrokes and the mouse. And the output is in a graphical matrix, and sometimes that's in a windowed matrix, and sometimes it's full screen. And there's all kinds of other things. Once you get into GUI, you can get on into gaming stuff, you can get into three-dimensional graphics, you can get into all kinds of that other stuff from the GUI, but it requires that graphical matrix. When you're dealing with that graphical matrix, that's the GUI. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look and see. I have a number of programs written on here. We've got our command line interface, we have our console user interface, and we have our graphical user interface. So the command line interface, we're going to take a look at that. Now, the thing that makes PHP kind of less desirable for system-based programming, it's super fast. That's the thing that makes it really desirable as far as the scripting languages are concerned. The kind of hybrid between script and programming languages. But it's also designed more for web, so you've really got to open it into code with these code readers here, these code designators. So then we're into code. Without that, we're just straight outputting, because it's designed to be used as a part of a web page. But yeah, here we can send output, and here I've got a loop, so this will happen as many times as I want to type it. And then I have a prompt, and then I go ahead and get the input, and trimming off the line drop is what that point is about, doing the trim. I send it to trim to make sure I drop the line off, and I'm getting from the standard input. It's a standard input. I'm going to get whatever's there, and I'm going to assign that, after it's had all the white space including line drops trimmed off of it, to the CL variable. Command line is what I use that for. If it's empty, it's going to, this is not in a function, therefore PHP is going to exit, because it's not exiting a function. There's no function it's in the root, and so it's in the root of that program, so there's no function to exit, therefore it's exiting the program, returning code 0, which means normal exit. And then it just continues to go on. If I don't return that, then it's going to return whatever I typed with, in case it's going to be sandwiched between you typed and talked back with a line drop. So it's returning information, and of course once that returns back, then we come back to our start, and it's going to prompt us again, and it's going to check to see if it's empty. So we're going to see how this program runs. So once again, we kind of saw it there on the slide, an example of a CLI. So it's, it has some output, and now I can send it a block of whatever I want to, and it does what it's supposed to do. It sends back an output, and now it's ready to receive the input. It's also sent back an output that tells me I'm ready to go, and then I can do again and again until finally it gets nothing back. Once it gets an empty string, then it knows to exit, returning code 0, which means it tells this console, here is a normal exit, don't give me any error information, just let me go back and get my prompt back. That way we can start talking about the next program, the next style. So that's one style that's very easy to use. That's the reason why most beginners in programming are taught to use that interface, because it's the easiest of them all. But now we're going to talk about one that's a bit more advanced. This is using Curses library, and that was a screen resolution I marked. That's how many, because this is working with a matrix. It's not working with a pixel matrix, it's working with a character matrix. So I've got to set up the whole screen on here. I've got to initiate the screen. I've got to attach to my library. I've got to initiate the screen. Initiate my colors. Tell it we're not echoing back everything I type in. Otherwise, I just put it right there where the cursor is. And set up the no cursor. I don't want the cursor to display. Now this is to initiate color pairing. So the color pairing number, and the foreground color code, and the background color code. It's only got like 8 colors or so that it uses, I think. But it has a number of different colors that you can use, and that's, well, so I just have to call them by number. And so in this case, it's foreground, background. So I can change over my colors on here. And then this is to tell it to redraw the screen, which I really haven't done anything on here. That's kind of actually unnecessary on this time. Then it's going to call this input function, which was up here that I defined. And then once I'm done with all of this, then it's going to exit out. It's going to end the window, start echoing back like it's supposed to. Anyway, so all that's what it's going to do. It's going to start echoing. It's going to I just put everything back the way it's supposed to be. Okay, so on input, though, in this case, I'm also passing it this O, which is my object for the curses screen. And yeah, so well, we entered it as a no delay. I don't recall what the delay deal was at this point. But here I've got a couple of variables I set to help me determine, what am I dealing with on here as far as, because I have one feature on here that if I push Control-C twice, it exits, but only twice. The first time it warns me I'm about to exit. That's one thing that's really neat about Python, is you can simply handle an exception and prevent the Control-C exit of a program. Alright, so yeah, we're going to try for exceptions and stuff like that. And then in here we are going to see if there's a keyboard input. We're trying to get the key, and then if there is a key, if there's an error on that, it returns an empty string. If it's not an empty string, then it's going to set these positions. This is what's really important in here. That's what I'm kind of pushing through here on. So if it's a keyboard interrupt, it tries to see, is it already been interrupted once? Is this the second time? And then this resets it down. So if I push any other key, it resets that. So I had to push Control-C twice in a row. That's what that CC variable's for. But first time it's just going to display a warning screen, and the second time we're going to be exiting at that point. That's turning that R to false, which turns this while to false, exits the while, and returns the function, and allows me to go through all this, putting back the screen and exiting out. Returns program code back to here. Back down here to my back down into here. So once it gets done with the input. But as it receives a valid keyboard input, I have, this is a line and this is the column which it will put this text. And then I can also add a color pair in this case. So here I've got a color pair that I've set up. That's what I initiated down over here. This is the initiate pairs. So this tells which color I'm also going to send it to. So it sends a lot of information. That's my main point behind this. It has an internal loop on the program as far as how it handles your keystrokes. It's handling it all internally. It handles keystrokes in, and then it sends out pretty extensive data as far as what it's going to use, what it's going to write, the position on the screen, the colors it's going to use. There's a lot more to that because now it's working with it as a whole screen, as a matrix, not just as here's text in, text out. Let the console handle it. It's handling it now. It's handling it on a deeper level, on a more advanced level. So let's just take a quick look here and see what this CUI program looks like when it runs. So it's a blank screen at first because we initiated a new screen. That was part of what that screen initiate was. As I type something in here, remember we type in the key and it shows me my key here. And see, I've got a different color. I changed the background around. I got one color here. I have green with a black background, and then I have a color over here that is black with a green background. And as I type in whatever key I want to, it shows me which key I typed. So once again, that Control-C, see, it gives me that warning message. Now if I type any other key, it goes away and I'm in normal mode again. But if I type it twice, I exit, and the neat thing is that was a separate screen that was up over it. So now I've got all my old stuff back here again. It's a really neat little system that we have with that. So that is how a console user interface program works as compared to a command line interface. Command line interface lets lets the terminal, lets the console handle it as it wants to. Here's the text, just you figure out how to display it. While console user interface, it's really taking control and it's handling it itself. And now we've got another interesting thing altogether, which is the GUI interface. And that works with, here we have another Python program where we're going to import the GTK, the Graphics Toolkit library, onto here. And we have to define a function that tells it to quit on in here. This is fewer lines of code to do this on this way that I did it. This works more with your window manager and lets your window manager handle a lot more on this. GTK is one of, there's several different systems that you can use. You can use, actually with Python you can even use Pygame, which is more of a game engine type thing, but there's a number of other like TK and some of the other toolkits that you can use to create your windows. But in this case here, I'm grabbing a new window and I'm going to set the title, that's the caption in that window, and I'm going to connect it to where whenever this is to handle an event, I'm connecting the destroy event to the end program function, which is up here, and the T is going to be, I think, a reference to the window if I recall correctly. And so it's going to reference which window is ending, but it doesn't matter. I don't call that. I just call to end. That's where I have to tell GTK to quit what it's doing, because I'm basically having it run everything. I'm telling it you have control when I work with the graphics toolkit. I don't handle any of that more directly. This is a lot more, it handles it. So I've set up my destroy event to run in program, which tells the whole GTK to exit. I'm going to set up my default size, 300 wide, 100 tall. It has in pixels. I'm going to tell that window to show, and then the most important thing on here is the GTK.main function. And you'll notice I don't have to do anything else down here to tell it not to exit my program, because it stays there at that point. That's where I'm passing control over to the GTK library, which then reads all the events, and that's where I have to have passed it a reference to anything which I want to handle those events. So this is where we're going to get a little bit more so it runs, and now I have everything else is now handled by GTK. All my dragging, dropping, any menus, any of my functionality, it's all handled. The graphics toolkit is talking to the window manager, and it's making all of this stuff happen. So, you know, here I've got my program on here, and I have not exited here. It's still on in there, and it won't exit until I actually call that quit function. I have to destroy that window, hitting that X, and then that will allow it to call my function here that calls its function to quit. So we'll see that I'll get a prompt back once I close this. And that allowed it to, that's because it allowed it to exit. But that's the main point behind this is it's reading mouse, it's reading keyboard events, and it's responding with a matrix on there. This is a graphical matrix which it responds to, not this text matrix type thing that we're running with over here. Thank you for watching.